Ball pythons, also known as royal pythons, are docile snakes that are very common in the pet trade. They are named for their habit of curling up into a ball when they feel threatened. Males will grow up to 3 feet long, while females can reach lengths of up to 5 feet long. So if you're planning on getting one, be ready to have a decent sized snake in a few years. These snakes can live up to 30 years with proper care. This includes proper enclosure setup, and that's what I'm going to be showing you how to do today. This is my ball python enclosure. There are several important factors in designing a proper setup. Let's start from the bottom. In my setup, I used a mix of 3 substrates: Eco Earth loose coconut fiber, a cypress mulch blend, and a little bit of topsoil. You can use more or less of each of these substrates depending on what you prefer. I like these substrates because they look natural and they retain moisture well, which is important since a ball python needs a humidity of between 50 and 60%. Avoid using substrates such as sand because it reduces humidity, it can cause impaction, and it is irritating to the ball python. Definitely don't use pine or cedar shavings because they release poisonous oils and chemicals that will harm your snake. Gravel is another substrate to avoid using because it can cause impaction, it's uncomfortable for your ball python, and it does not absorb any odors or retain any moisture. The list goes on for why it's a bad substrate. Aspen can be used, but be careful because it reduces humidity and can get moldy. I'll have a video in the future that has more detailed on ball python substrates, but I think that covers it for now. If you're getting a baby ball python, you need to have at least a 20-gallon, and for adults, you need a minimum of a 40-gallon. Although it might seem like ball pythons aren't all that active, they are nocturnal and move around more than you realize. In order for your ball python to feel secure, it is required that you add hides to the enclosure. It is best to have 2 hides, one on each end of the tank. You want your hide to be big enough for your ball python to fit in, and I prefer natural looking hides. Some people might say that you need a humidity for your ball python of 30 to 50%, but really, as mentioned before, they need a humidity of 50 to 60%. When they're shedding, they need an increased humidity. You can increase their humidity by misting their tank more often, or even adding a humid hide to help them shed. Your enclosure should have a temperature gradient, meaning that it is warmer on one side of the tank and cooler on the other. On the cool end, you should have the temperature be about 75 to 85 degrees Fahrenheit, while on the warm side it should be about 80 to 85 degrees. You should provide a basking spot of up to 90 degrees. This can be accomplished by adding a heat mat or a heat lamp. If the temperature at night drops below 70 degrees, it may be necessary to have a heat mat on at night. Never place the heat mat inside the enclosure. Always put it on the outside underneath the enclosure so that your ball python does not burn itself. You may also want to get a thermostat to regulate the temperature of the heat mat. Your ball python should have 10 to 12 hours of lighting per day in the summer and 8 to 10 hours per day in the winter. This is called a photo period. All pet reptiles and amphibians should have this to simulate day and night. A heat lamp should be used if you are not using a heat mat. Otherwise, a heat lamp is not required. UVB is also not required, but it can greatly improve the health of your ball python. Be sure to enrich your ball python by adding branches, vines, and rocks for them to climb on and hide in. The intensity of this step depends on you, and whether you like a more natural-looking tank or not. Although ball pythons are primarily terrestrial, they often enjoy climbing and exploring around their entire enclosure. Of course, you're going to want a water bowl for your ball python. You want it to be shallow so that it doesn't drown, but you want it to be big enough so that the ball python can soak in it. To prevent your snake from escaping, use lid locks or even rocks to secure the lid on your enclosure, because the ball python might try to escape by pushing the lid open. Don't let them surprise you with their strength. They're great escape artists. A ball python enclosure is not a ball python enclosure without a ball python, so let's add the snake. This is Troy. He is 2 years old now and doing great. Make sure you do not house more than 1 ball python together, as they may fight, harm, or even eat each other. The only time you want to do this is if you are trying to breed them, which you shouldn't do without experience or a lot of research. Also, when feeding your ball python, some people say you should feed it in a separate enclosure or box. This is a common misconception. It is not necessary to feed it in another enclosure. In fact, it may even cause some problems. That's it. You now know how to properly set up an enclosure for your ball python. If I missed any information or you think I should have done anything differently, let me know in the comments. I would really like your feedback so that I can improve my future videos. Thanks for watching, and if you want to continue learning more about remarkable reptiles and amazing amphibians, then don't forget to subscribe. See you in the next video.